The West fears the truth. An Italian journalist won't let you lie. Are you planning to go to Italy at all? That was my first question to the Italian anti-fascist journalist Andrea Lucidi, who is actively traveling through Donbass, Belarus. Russia has been to Syria, Lebanon, Venezuela, and tells democracies the truth. My colleague smiled. As long as he speaks like this in democracies, he's unlikely to return home. He recently had to leave Italy in a hurry. Andrea told me, for example, about freedom of speech in the European Union.
Right now, not just in Italy but in the European Union, there's no place for journalism material from Russia, from Belarus, from Donbass, because state channels of course don't want it, and other channels are afraid. I want to work for the truth. And here in Belarus, in Russia, I can work in total freedom, without problems, without...
But we have a dictatorship. Where?
What dictatorship?
Lucidi came to Belarus after hearing European horror stories about us. And truthful information says, well, very little.
People said that here in Belarus there are no products, no stores. There's just bread. And just potatoes, no other products. And then we go now, I took photos I want to post on Twitter.
What about sanctions?
A large percentage of the Italian people are against sanctions against war for peace. Why? Because they saw how much sanctions against Russia cost. After sanctions, electricity and gas prices were 2 to 3 times higher, heating was more, cost twice as much. And of course, people don't want to pay for sanctions, don't want to pay for war against Russia.
Are there problems with historical truth in the EU? Yes, says the Italian journalist. By the way, he's a historian by education. These problems are political. After February 2022, the topic of fascism, neo-Nazism, historical memory became unpopular in Italy. Look at an example. In Italy in the 1940s, there were many partisans. More than 5,000 were Soviet partisans, but now European officials try not to remember them.
In 2022, April 25th is the day of Free Italy against German occupation. And we organized an event in Milan for Soviet partisans. There was a lot of police, because the Ukrainian Association in Milan said there was a possibility they would come and cause problems with us.
Do you know why such memory lapses happen? Because Ukrainian troops are all in swastikas, in neo-Nazi symbols.
Until 2022, Italian authorities, the European Parliament, they were always against fascism. When there was a swastika, or when there was a party, an ultra-right party, which held an event with ruins, there was always a problem. And today there isn't. Why? Because they know 100% very well that there is neo-Nazism in Ukraine. In the USSR there are many soldiers, Azov is a regiment, a battalion, where for Nazis they have contacts, connections, all neo-Nazis, neo-fascists against Europe.
The Supreme Court in Italy allowed the Nazi salute. We Belarusians can't understand how this is even possible. It hurts us to see these images, which are all over the internet. The General Prosecutor's Office has been investigating the genocide case for years. They still find bodies of women and children killed and burned by fascists. And we face these symbols again.
I can think, like people here, in Belarus, in Russia, when there are some videos, they might ask themselves, how can the Italian authorities do nothing against events like this, against this group? I have no answer.
And now remember the uproar in the West when we brought nuclear weapons back to the country.
There is a NATO policy called nuclear sharing. And since the 1960s, the US has had nuclear weapons in Italy and Germany and Belgium, and a few years ago also in Turkey. Is this normal? Did Russia say anything? Belarus didn't say anything. And when Belarus also wants, well, insurance for security against, well, we see Poland, the Baltics, they now, if always, well, as one of the quantities against Belarus, they said, oh look, this is against us. And the US started with nuclear weapons in the European Union, in European countries. Why doesn't Belarus have the right to national security?
Meanwhile, let me remind you, they are constantly arming themselves, training at our borders. We conduct defensive exercises. Western neighbors always practice attack scenarios. And they arm themselves to the point of madness. They train and send militants to us. They organize color revolutions and hybrid wars against us. We always talk about peace. We say stop the war, develop relations with countries, help needy peoples.
The US, NATO, they want to be the world's police, like a global police.
To be the world's policeman. Yes.
The total hero of the world. And when there are countries like Russia, like Belarus, they say, well, we are for peace, but we have our values, we have our interests, we want our security. But Washington can't answer yes.
Well, maybe it understands that its time as a hegemon is ending, that others are already emerging.
Well, yes, now there is a multipolar world. This is a concrete reality. Now, of course.
The time of the hegemon is ending. America will have to come to terms with this, and I sincerely wish European politicians wisdom and patriotism. Together, we can be stronger.